and welcome to today's session. First of all, thank you to the Spring IO team for the organization, and thank you for your interest to this topic. So my name is Badr Nass Lahsen. I'm the manager of the solution engineering team in EMEA for all machine identity at Palo Alto Networks. And today I want to share with you a topic that I like a lot. It's OpenAPI. How can we integrate it with Spring Boot 4? So originally, I'm the creator of the project, Spring.Doc OpenAPI. And also, I'm really deeply focused on security matters. So I have been working on Spring and also the evolution on machine, human identities. And also, I have written a book around the Spring security, how we can secure effectively your cloud-native applications, your modern microservices and REST APIs with the latest standards that we know nowadays. So this is for the intro. So our agenda today is fully packed. To be honest, we have a very short duration, but I will try to be maximum efficient. So first of all, I will start with some history. So we are discussing about Spring Boot 4. The current version of OpenAPI is OpenAPI 3.2. We will see how these two topics evolved in the Java ecosystem and how I would say we are unifying these two words with the Spring.Doc OpenAPI. But there has been a lot of changes. Nowadays, we talk a lot about AI and modern developer experience. So I will focus on two new topics maybe you are not aware of. So in the Spring.Doc OpenAPI, it's Scalar. Scalar is a very modern UI to interact with APIs. So you can consider it as the next gen for developer experience when it comes to interacting with APIs. And there is also another topic that we will cover today related to integration with IA agents, because it's also a trending topic when it comes to enterprise level modernization. A lot of companies invested heavily on their business logic that is developed with REST APIs internally, but now they want to achieve the move to IA and expose it as MCP I would say endpoints internally to make it consumed internally, but you don't want to develop heavily in order to expose these endpoints into MCP. So I will show you also how we can achieve it quickly with the new evolution of the framework. First of all, a reminder about the role of OpenAPI nowadays. Nowadays it's a standard de facto. Generally speaking, when you are modernizing your architecture, you rely on OpenAPI because you want to use it for design at the earliest phases when you are designing your APIs. You want to use it in the second phase when you publish your APIs to your consumers. And generally speaking, it can be your front-end developers, but also your applications that are consuming. And most importantly, you need to secure and govern these APIs. And with the OpenAPI, you have a standard to interact effectively with the ecosystem. So you have security protocols that are normalized. You have standardized how you interact with webhooks. And this is really important nowadays when you want to open your APIs to the external world. Always I start from the beginning. So when we discuss about OpenAPI, generally speaking, it's machine readable in the left, but also human readable. So in the right with the HTML presentation for business, and you get the maximum value, I would say, when you have all the actors, of course, together. But what is important is that in OpenAPI 3.1, we have structured it by mainly having parts. You have the components, elements, and the webhooks. It's only three main elements that are mandatory if you want to define your OpenAPI and expose it to the external world. Now, let's also discuss some history about the framework and how are we nowadays targeting the integration with Spring Boot 4. So in each major Java release, you had after it a major Spring release. Okay, so this is the history, and in parallel, there was also the evolution of the standard, of the OpenAPI standard. So it started with Swagger 2.0, okay? Initially, it wasn't called OpenAPI, and afterwards, we had to handle the new versions of OpenAPI and integrate them in parallel with the evolution of the framework, mainly with the Spring framework and also with the evolutions of Java. So today we are at OpenAPI 3.2, but the most widely used nowadays version is OpenAPI 3.1 in the ecosystem. And we wait also for some downstream libraries to integrate and to support OpenAPI 3.2 to make sure that also we integrate them into the ecosystem. So this is the state of the art right now. Generally speaking, we are in a stable version of OpenAPI that is really the most widely used in the ecosystem. The main changes you might have noticed is that, for example, in the 3.1, if you have HTTP GET operations, you can pass the request body. In the past, it was prohibited, but nowadays it's possible with the new specification. Also, the responses are not anymore mandatory in the OpenAPI spec 3.1. There has been a huge simplification in terms of types. So there was the move to the JSON schema, which makes the definition of OpenAPIs much more standard and much easier to integrate, we can say, with the external ecosystem. So this is about the history in terms for OpenAPI. Now, the idea is to bridge the gap between OpenAPI and Spring. So with the arrival of Spring Boot 4, so in November 2025, we have a really complete and robust framework that is also enhanced in terms of performance capabilities. And also, we have seen some IA integration with the ecosystem. But what is the most important for us is the API integration, is the API native integration. So in Spring Boot 4, the major enhancement that we rely on is related to API versioning. So this is one of the topics that we will see today. Also, historically in Spring Boot 4, you had also the problem details RFC that has been already integrated and which is already in the framework by default supported. There are other aspects that are brought to the framework, but generally speaking, they make just your APIs more resilient, more or let's say safer. For example, the gspecify to make sure that you have better or robust code in terms of null check and making your code more resilient. Now, in terms of numbers, so about the project, where are we right now? So these are the latest statistics from the Sonatype, the Maven public repository, where you have, let's say, all the artifacts. And basically, in the last quarter, we had almost 300 million downloads of the Spring Doc OpenAPI. So we will see afterwards that there are different components, but we had almost 300 million downloads. And it's a project that I started it in 2019. And now we are at around 3,700 GitHub stars. And what makes open source, and in general this project lives, is the contributors. Okay, it's the open source contributors, so we have more than 100 contributors in the project, and it's really the strength. It's the open source community. Also, what is interesting is that it's adopted at the enterprise level. First of all, the project was created because there are some regulations. For example, if we discuss about the payment industry, in Europe you have instant payments. You have the PSD2, PSD3 that I would say mandates companies to expose in OpenAPI format for the payment industry. So that's why, for example, you will find some financial institutions, but also some big tech companies, as you can see in the slides, that are already adopting it largely within their organization. So this is about the general overview. Now I will deep dive into some of the components. Of course, as we have limited time, I will focus on the new ones today for the live demos. But overall, these are some elements that are already supported. So we support Java, Kotlin, and Groovy. For the observability, we support actuator, and we support the both modes, reactive and blocking or servlet mode, that are also available in, I would say, in the different implementations. You can choose. There is native Gradle VM support, okay, since Spring Boot 3, but now it's even more enhanced with the Spring Boot 4, really strong. And in terms of security, there is also native integration with the Spring Security and Spring Authorization Server. There is integration as well with the serverless. As you can see in the ecosystem, there are a lot of things to integrate, but it was a requirement. So serverless integration, so with Spring Cloud Function. You can also expose multiple group of APIs in your app. So there is native group support, integration with Spring Cloud Gateway, and also with your CI/CD pipelines. Because sometimes when you expose OpenAPI, you don't want it maybe in production, but you want it just to be built and generated in an offline mode by your CI/CD pipelines. So this is also available through some plugins, like you have like some Maven or Gradle plugins that are available out of the box. Okay, now we will deep dive more in details into, I would say, the architecture, software architecture of the project. So the library is built on top of Swagger core, okay? And there is a common module where you have all the main logic that is centralized. Now, depending on implementation, you might move to the reactive mode or servlet. So you have to choose either the Spring Dok OpenAPI Starter Webflux or the Web MVC implementation. So this is if you want just to generate OpenAPI. But sometimes, and this is the general ask of developers, is I want to also have a user interface where I can test my APIs. Also the request also for testers, test teams. So you had originally the Web MVC UI. So automatically, once your application is developed, there is auto-discovery of the endpoints and they are available. But now with the new versions, we have also a Scalar version for developer experience that we will see. And also an MCP UI. I don't know for people that develop the MCP endpoints, just I would say in the room, is there anyone that is developing MCP endpoints in the room or MCP servers? Okay, interesting. Because if you rely on MCP, the idea is to say, I use, for example, Spring IA to develop my MCP endpoints, but the general problem is that how will you test it? So you can have Java tests, but you don't have an equivalent in a UI mode to auto-discover all what you have developed. So what developers do in general, they use an external tool, a JavaScript tool, if you know, I would say that you need to install externally in order to test your MCP endpoints. So it makes the development process heavier because you need to install different tools, different UIs, run 2 different servers locally in order to solve this problem or just to test an MCP endpoint. Whereas this thing, you can already achieve it locally. But we will deep dive into this part more in details once we progress in the presentation. So we will start the first demo with Scalar, okay? So as I said, Scalar is really first-class UI that is developed and it's open source. There is an enterprise version, just there are some features that are limited. But for the daily tasks, I would say for a developer, it's already more powerful from my own experience than Swagger UI. Okay. So it's developer first oriented. It's very lightweight. So for example, if you want to expose it through your CDN, it will not take too much time to load. And of course, it will be very performant as it's too lightweight. So I will start the demos slowly. Okay. So I will first of all switch to IntelliJ, and you tell me. So here I will start with this demo, really the simple one. How are we going to implement Scalar? So originally, if we take the implementation, the first part is that we have the web MVC implementation, but in addition, originally, people, what they do is that they used to declare the web MVC UI originally. Okay? So the switch to Scalar is very simple. It's just you need to declare to replace UI by Scalar. It's the only change that you will have to do in your apps. So for example, if I take an original project that was using the web MVC UI, so this one, as you can see, it had this implementation, and we just switch the dependency, and that's it. It's the only thing that the developers need to do. So if I switch, I just want to show you the UI, and then we continue the presentation. So now it's starting. I will just move to the user interface. Okay, so here I'm trying to expose all the endpoints. Okay, I'm trying to expose all the endpoints of a book controller. Okay, so automatically, once the application started, automatically we were able to discover all the endpoints. But for example, if I want to test, okay, I choose this endpoint. I have the parameters. I have the different types of responses. And simply, if you want to test, you have clean UI, how you want to experiment, and automatically you will have the response. Automatically you have the response of all your REST APIs. Now, what is interesting is that in the UI, you can generate clients with different technologies. So, for example, I have here, you can generate different SDKs, but also when you make any REST API call, so if I come back, if I want to make any REST API call, here you have the different languages that are available. And you can see it's much, much richer than the Swagger UI and what is available with the Swagger logic. For example, let's say we have some fans of C, and you have the corresponding logic. So this is just to introduce the UI, the new enhancement in the UI, and what is possible. And now what I want to share is the next evolution in Spring Boot 4. So this is related mainly to the versioning. So as you know, in the history of APIs, there were a lot of discussions about versioning and how we will achieve it at the enterprise level. But a lot of companies define their own rules. But the problem is that on the Spring Boot framework, it wasn't enforced. And this is, I would say, the strength in general of frameworks, is that we can enforce some rules. So now you have really robust framework with the problem details, with the versioning aspects that are already there. For example, we will avoid to have a lot of duplication. One of the advantages is that a lot of boil rate code that you need to maintain, hugely maintain, with this new version, you don't have to do it. But now that you are developing these APIs, you also need to discover it. So how will Spring.Doc OpenAPI expose it into OpenAPI format? Because this is the challenge. So we will see that we will cover the 4 strategies. So the first strategy, path segments, as you can see, that you have the version in the path that is defined. You have the second strategy, the query parameter. So in general, you can pass the version as an argument of your query parameters. Third one is the request headers. And the fourth one is the media type. So in the media type, you can also pass the version. So this is also something that we see also often. Now, I would say the framework allows to have different strategies. But generally speaking, you see in terms of best practice, when you define a strategy within an organization or within an application, you should be consistent. Okay, so this would be my advice for versioning in general when it comes to implementation at large scale. Now I will show a few demos for what we will call the versioning, and then we can move with the MCP and the IA part. So here, all the demos that I'm showing right now, at the end of the presentation, I will share the GitHub link. Okay, so everything will be available. So I will start again from the beginning with the dependencies in our project. So here, what do I have? So I'm having the web and web MVC UI. So this is what people already do when they use Spring.Doc OpenAPI. Okay, so here there is no big change. Now, in terms of versioning, I will go to the web config. So in this example, I'm using the media type. Okay, in this example, I'm using the media type, and I'm allowing 2 versions. And also, what is interesting to see, so the same example in this demo flow, really the same example, we will switch it to the different strategies. This is the idea. Okay, so here we have the first strategy as media type, and we can see that we defined, I would say, the versions and the media type that is corresponding. For each endpoint, so I have /user media, I have different responses. So I want a different response for the V1 and the V2. Okay, so we have 2 different DTOs. Okay, first one, second one. Okay, one is with 2 attributes, second one is with 3 attributes. And basically, that's it. There is a little detail here just to handle the versioning. So if, for example, someone calls with /v1, we want to remove the prefix. Just, I would say you can call it as syntactic preference. And that's it. So I will start the app. So this one is using the web MVC UI. So at this moment, we will use the Swagger UI. Okay. So this is the first example. I'm having the media type. So in the response, as you can see, we have the 2 generated. Okay, the two media types that has been generated. First one, if I test it, I'm having the ID with 3 attributes that we mentioned. Okay, and if I test the second one, okay, so I'm having the ID with just 2 attributes. Okay, so in this curl or in this HTTP request, we pass the media type, and depending on the media type, we have variant response. So this is pretty standard, but it's handled also in the OpenAPI description and in the Swagger UI. It's natively supported. Now we will move to the second strategy. And for here, let me just check where we are. Okay, so I'm having in the same project. So now let's switch to the paths implementation. we will see same logic, okay? I'm having the web MVC UI, the same parser, but what is important is here the definition. So to have path versioning, we need to use path segment, okay? So this is the main difference. And if we go to the controller, so I'm having two different syntaxes just to show you also the strength of the framework, that we can support different ways of versioning. So we have the /v and then the version with the users, or / the version directly. So this is also important to know in terms of syntax, that we can also support different types of path definition that are available in the framework. So it's the main difference. So I switched the project, we start again. Let's see. And here, instead of one endpoint, I'm having two endpoints, right? Because I'm versioning with the path. Okay. And same logic. So if you test, okay, so you have 3, and here we'll have 4. Okay. So this is for the second strategy. Now let's see another strategy. It's the request header. Okay. So let's switch and check. I will try to go fast just to make sure also we cover some other stuff. So as you can see here, we go with the request header. This is really the main change in the definition. And what is important is that here, you see, I'm using /users with the version. One change that I have in this type of project, just to show you also the difference in terms of presentation. So here I switch it to Scalar. Okay. So go. List. What should be, or is the application started? It's not the right one. I believe I haven't started the application. Okay. So here I'm having the application, and I'm passing, as you can see, XAPI version. So this is what we had defined is in our configuration class. And same logic we can test. So with the V1 and with the V2, and of course, if you want to discuss, for example, here there are some interesting stuff. For example, you can also ask, I will move to the next step, but you can also ask, so there is an embedded IA agent with limited, of course, access, because after that you will need to switch to the enterprise version. But you can also ask the AI agent to make these API calls for you, and also test the responses in, I would say, with your input prompts. So now we move to the last strategy quickly. So the last one that remains is the query param. I wait, this time I need to make sure that the application starts correctly. And let's see how it's presented. So as you can see here in the version, I'm having two versions, V1 and 1.0. And why we have this? Because it can seem not consistent. So basically in the presentation here, we used query param. But the difference is that in the controller, okay, we are using this one version and this one version 2 with this syntax. And in my definition, when I try to access, I will have the API parser that will change the prefix. So if I'm having /v1, it will become 1, and I'm having v2, it will become 2. So here, just to make the test, and we can we can wrap up this part. So this is the version, okay? This is the version v1, v2. And if I switch to v2, we will have again the new version that is available. So it's always, I would say, integrated smoothly. And this is my message. It's the choice is yours. If you want to have Scalar or the Swagger UI implementation, it's transparent, and it's, I would say, natively integrated with the Spring Boot and the versioning. You have almost zero configuration to do. As you can see, I didn't add any code that is Spring Doc. Okay, this is the beauty of this integration. Now let's move to some other enhancements that are available in the framework. So what we are trying to do nowadays is that you are having OpenAPI specs. You are having already your business logic that is already built internally, but you want to expose it to AA agents. Problem is that you don't know the impact of an AA agent. Okay, for example, they can have, I would say, some dangerous operation, like, for example, delete. It can delete tables, or it can delete some sensitive data. So how are we going to control this safely since the development phase? This is really the challenge. So the idea is to introduce some guardrails, some general rules. So what I will show is that for some mutating methods, we will automatically in the framework enforce what we call human-in-the-loop validation. In general, if there is any creation by default or deletion, automatically we say in the framework it needs human validation, unless the developer or in the configuration we decided that this method is safe. We can allow the AA agents to call it to change the state of the data in the company. And of course, you will have a central endpoint where you can discover all what you have developed. Okay, so for people that remembers the, for example, in SOAP, okay, you have the WSDL, or you have the registry of all your operations. So it's almost the same. So you will have the registry of all your operations or your tools that are exposed to your app. Also, another problem that we are trying to solve is what we call the black box problem. So generally speaking, AI agents are subject to hallucinations, right? But you have developed in your companies very reliable and consistent APIs. So if you guide your AI agent for the business logic to call directly the right API, job is done. Okay. On the other hand, you need to make sure that any destructive action is under control. And this is the big risk. So the idea is also for the risky operations to make sure that we have the right guardrails to avoid any impact or any damage in production. And this is the shift. This is the paradigm shift that we are having right now in the development and in developer ecosystem, is that we are moving from a solution that is primary-centric to developers to a solution that needs also primary-centric to IA agents. Okay, and this is what is really important. So traditionally, I have shown the try out button, but now what I need is to expose to the IA agent the most relevant description, okay, or the most relevant way to consume my APIs. And generally speaking, the OpenAPI spec, how it was built, it wasn't built for IA agents. Okay. So we will try to focus on this, and I will try in the presentation to focus mainly on MCP. Nowadays, you know, MCP is one of the most used protocols for AI interactions. It has been standardized by Anthropic, but it's largely used. There are a lot of changes, especially in the security landscape when it comes in regards to MCP. But we are evolving into a direction where nowadays it's the most used, I would say, protocol for AI interactions. So the idea of the bridge that we put in place is to automatically introspect all your controllers and expose them as MCP endpoints. Simply this. So what is done behind the scenes is what you can see in the table. So each operation ID will be automatically transformed into a tool name. Its description into a tool description. Its request body into an input schema. And you can also inherit all the security aspects that you have in Spring Security. Spring Security is very strong. People in MCP, they are still struggling. How are we going to handle authorizations? But Spring solved it many years ago. And we have really robust authorization policies that you can just extend and apply to your endpoints, to your MCP endpoints. And this is also what we will see in the demo. An example of, I would say, an example of prompt that you want to share and expose in terms of description for your AI agents. Let's suppose that I didn't have the MCP tool description. Let's suppose that in your application you didn't have. So how will the AI agent guess that to call this API you need a type UID, for example? And how, if I want, for example, to add some guardrails, like I don't want to use password reset or some sensitive operations, how can I enforce this? Because I have the front-end developer that is consuming my APIs, but also I need to make sure that my AI agents has the most accurate description. So what you can do is that you add an annotation MCP tool description that will be automatically exposed in, for your AI agents. Also, I discussed about the guardrails. So this is the default configuration. You have get, head, and options that are by default, I would say, allowed or whitelisted. But you can decide. You can decide in the app. So we have a customizer where you can decide which operations you would like to allow. So which method, but also which endpoint. And we integrate the human in the loop, which means that automatically, if your operation is under control of a human, it needs a human approval before the AI agent proceeds. Okay, and all this you can apply it, I would say, in a granular way. Some other interesting aspects when it comes to MCP, in general, you need some monitoring of all what you are doing. You have in the dashboard, you will have also the ratio of the mutating, non-mutating applications, non-mutating methods, but also you will have some performance indicators that are very, very important. So for your tools, for all what you are developing, so you have the MCP call that will, the MCP endpoint that will call the REST endpoint. Sometimes there might be latency, so you need to investigate. So all these details, you will have them in the UI. And one of the also the most important aspects, because that's why also we say that sometimes the OpenAPI description is not enough, is the token consumption. So for your context windows, the idea is to make sure that it's the most accurate for the AI agent. Imagine you have huge response. So automatically it will wipe or it will reach the limit in your context window. And also you will consume more tokens, so it will cost you more for this type of interactions. So with this vision about the size or the size of the payload or the number of tokens that you are consuming, you can also interact to make sure that what you are exposing for the AI agents is tuned for the AI agents. Okay, and we have seen it sometimes with the versioning, where sometimes you can act on the DTOs or some aspects where you can have more lightweight exposition. So with this, we reach to the demo. I will switch to the code just to show you an example. So in this example, I'm having an MCP server and an authorization server. So I'm trying, normally you don't need the authorization server if you want just to play with it, but here I'm exposing it over internet. So I prefer that we have proper authentication before. So it's integrated with the Spring Community project for the authorization server. So what is important? If I want MCP exposition, okay. So here I'm having, instead of the starter web MVC, MCP or Scala or the Swagger UI, here I use MCP. It means that I want to expose my endpoints as MCP for the external world. There will be an UI also that is available more for development purpose that you can disable for your production. So this works. So what will be done is that under the hood, we will rely on the Spring AI Starter MCP server. And you don't have to code yourself the implementation for Spring AI. So combining these two dependencies automatically exposes your REST APIs as MCP endpoints. Okay? Now, to see the examples, I'm having here hello controller. Okay? So I'm having a controller with some, I would say, some operations. And as you can see, I'm having pre-authorized. So for example, for this call, the guy needs to be authenticated. And you can also apply or enforce other policies. So the idea is that by default, I want to extend this description. So it means this description, I want it also to be available for the MCP server. But what if I wanted to have a proper description? So you can also rely on the MCP tool description. I'm just trying to see if I'm having tool name. MCP. Example, this one. Just check. No, this one is not the right one. I just want to show you how can you enhance the description. So originally you have the OpenAPI description, which is the operation. But what we have seen in the slide is that if you want to enforce the description, you can use the MCP tool description annotation. And this one is Sprint Doc. If you check here, you will see that Sprint Doc annotation. So here we have the demo. We have these examples. And what I want also to show is that in this project, I'm having few controllers that are exposed. But also, I have some native tools, some native MCP tools that don't rely on REST. So we can also discover them. So in the discovery, we'll have the native MCP tools, but in addition, the REST-based MCP tools. So the native MCP tools are there. So if I check, so here, as you can see, is tools, Spring AI tools that are also available. So if I move to the demo, here, so in this example, I have deployed remotely the server. And what you can do is that you can interact with the server. So each time there is an interaction, we will see it in the audit logs. Okay. And we will have some data about what has been done already. So the audit logs here, you can also decide to clear it. I cleared it mainly for the sake of the demo. So let's suppose I want to make a call here to find by ID. I get stopped. Okay, I get stopped. I have 400.01. So what you can do, I will simulate the call. Here it will be. So I will simulate this. Normally I don't have to hard code it, right? But as we are in a demo mode, so I will use the client ID, client secret. So the best practice here is to store the client ID, client secret. It needs to come from a secret manager, or the identity needs to come from another source. But this is the spec. This is the spec. You need to pass a client ID, client secret. And if I'm in development mode, it's not too bad. Okay. Invalid client, because there is a slash. And no one told me that there is a slash. Huh? But look, so we have the identities just to show you that we can see. So this is really a valid GWT token that has been generated. And now if I test, because I didn't create, but I have 400.01 because I haven't created, the ID doesn't exist, but I have different error. All these interactions, okay, right now, we start seeing them. Now, if I move to the IA agent, so one of the most used, I would say, agents is Claude, right? So what I will do is that I will show you that I'm having an MCP endpoint. So I declared my MCP server, and I can tell him, okay, MCP, and what I will do, so it asks me to authenticate. So as I'm asked to authenticate, I will authenticate as user. Authentication successful. And then I will tell get tools of spring.doc demo MCP. So what will be done right now, I just want to achieve a discovery of all the available MCP tools and get the response. So let's wait. And in parallel, what I can also show is that so normally what it will show me, okay, if I execute here, it will show me all the sessions that we have at the Spring IO conference right now. Okay. And also it should show me all the tools that I have. So all the tools that we have here, like find by ID and everything, we should be able to discover them. Now it's taking some time, I believe, because it's the connection, right? Let's just check. Okay. Just check for the connection. But we need to be patient with IA agents. You don't need to force. And here we are. Okay. Now, so for example, if I want to make a call, I will just show you one thing, is that if I want to make a post, so I have multiple ones, okay? If I want to create a book, okay, so here I have books, so I want to create, okay? I won't show you just the human in the loop. So the idea is that we will intercept, because it's a mutating method, we'll intercept the call, and what should happen is that we need to ask the human to approve. This is the idea. And all these steps should be, I would say they should be traced. Okay, I will choose one. Because now he asked what are the elements that you want to create. Okay. We almost exceeded the time. I just wait to run it, and we will be done. But the idea here is that once the call will be made, what we want to see is that in the audit logs, it has been intercepted, and a human approved, and then the IA can continue his work of the REST API. But for some reason, there is more latency. This is also the beauty of the live demos. Right? And in the meantime, just to show in the UI. So, for example, the first action, when I said each action that I'm trying to make, each action, we will see it here in the logs. And automatically, once the guy will improve, we will also see it in terms of status. Also, what is interesting is that you have also the role of the users, you have the payload, you have also the information about the response size and the number of tokens. It's very, I would say, it depends on the presentation you have, but I believe I can make it clear. You see, you have the size of the payload and the number of tokens that are associated. Okay. So, see. So here it asks me to proceed. So as you can see, the request has been intercepted. It asks for human approval. Okay. So here, as it asks for human approval, automatically it has been traced. Okay. Human approval. So this is with the remote. And automatically here, I say, okay, I want you to proceed. And the idea is that at the end to approve. Okay, the idea is at the end to approve. And we can then, you see, as I approved, automatically now it's okay. So you have all the steps. And what is important is that you have all the details of the LLM intent and all the data that is associated. And with this, we will reach out, I would say, the end of the presentation. So just to wrap up is to say that with Spring Boot, you are having the architecture of an, I would say, an AI native for your backend. It's already there. You have all the elements. So really happy coding. And thank you for joining this session. Thank you for joining me today. And we can keep in touch on LinkedIn or on other sessions. Thank you so much. Thank you.